Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
So now let's start our new topic here, that is measures to deepen democracy in India. Now here students, before this we were talking about challenges to Indian democracy. Now when we are talking about challenges to Indian democracy, we learnt about various points here. Isn't it correct? Yes. We talked about many factors such as population explosion. Then we talked about illiteracy. Then we talked about regionalism, casteism, communalism, right? Terrorism. So all these factors, all these challenges, these factors basically they were the challenges to Indian democracy. Now here in this topic, we are going to understand the measures that should be taken to deepen democracy or the feeling of democracy in our country, India. So one by one, we are going to talk about three important measures here. Now, the first step here, the first step in deepening democracy in India is by educating people. Very important point here, students. Now, like I told you, when we were talking about the challenges of Indian democracy or challenges to Indian democracy, one of these challenges were illiteracy, right? And I told you that according to 2011 census, we have seen that only 74% people in our country are literate, right? They know how to read and write. But here, is reading and writing sufficient enough? No, students. People should be educated. People should be politically aware, socially aware, culturally aware about everything that is happening around them. Because literate people, they are a good asset to any country. Why? Because they can promote unity and also help in the development of the country. Right, students? Only when people are literate, only when people are educated, they can become a good asset and also they can help in the development of a country, be it in economic terms, be it in social terms or any other terms that we are talking about here. But most important point here is to educate people. Now this is the first measure that we should take in order to deepen our democracy in India. Now when we are talking about educating people, in what spheres we can educate people, right? That can be in terms of political terms, in social terms, in cultural terms, economic terms and so on, right? So overall awareness is needed in our country. And when we are talking about today's era, we see that people are becoming very much aware. Now imagine the time, students, when in history you have learnt about the British era, right? Do you remember the British times? We have seen that many ill practices were taking place. So when we are talking about the British times, we see that many social evil practices existed in the society, right? Such as the sati system, dowry also, right? And we have seen that these social reformers who were the educated people, right? Only through education they wanted to transform the society. They wanted to eradicate all these evil practices from the society, right? So here you understand why education is important. Because people at that time, they believed more in customs. They believed more in these social practices, right? That was prevalent from ancient times, right, students? So here we understand why educating people is really important. Now, freedom, equality, humanism and inculcation of scientific temperament should be the themes of education. Now here it is really important for us to understand that in what spheres should we educate people? What are the main themes? So the first one is freedom. Definitely everyone has the right, the basic rights that our constitution has also provided, right? So people should be made aware about the freedom, right, that they are enjoying, and also they should enjoy in a free country. Apart from that, equality. We saw that in our country inequalities exists. Now it can be in any form. It can be in political form, it can be in gender, it can be in economic form, and so on, right? So therefore, equality should be proposed more and more in our country. Apart from that, humanism. Now, have you heard the term humanism? Now, when you have read about medieval history, you must have come across the term that is humanism, right, students? The term that we have learnt in the medieval period. So basically, when we are going to define humanism in simple terms, we say that human values are more important than any religious beliefs, right? So there was a time when customs were practiced, when religious beliefs were much more important than anything else. So there was this era of humanism where we see that human values now became more important than anything else, and more importantly, the religious beliefs. So therefore, human values are important in our country, and therefore it should be treasured, right? Now, inculcation of scientific temperament. What does this mean? It means that there should be logical, right? Logical thinking, or it can be scientific thinking, it can be reasonable thinking, and so on. Whenever we are talking about scientific temperament, it means that one should rationally or logically think about any matter, right? So these should be the themes of education in our country. Now, while we are talking about education, we see that it leads to a growth of new intelligentsia. Yes, students, it gives rise to a new group, that is the intellectuals. People who contribute directly to creation, transmission, and criticism of ideas. Very important point here. Now, when people are getting politically aware, socially aware about a lot of issues, what happens then? Now, when people are getting aware, it means that they are going to discuss, they are going to deliberate about all those topics, right? That is happening around us. So, therefore, it directly leads to creation, transmission, and criticism of ideas. Firstly, what is happening? People are now creating ideas in their mind, creating their own ideas, their own opinions about any particular topic. Now, after that, what happens? Transmission of these ideas. Now, when these group of intellectuals, group of educated people, they are coming together, what happens? They are transmitting their own opinions among themselves. This is again an important point here. That is how people are understanding what is right and what is wrong, right? Only after they are educated and they are trying to give their opinions to one another, right, students? And at last, there is the criticism of ideas. Definitely. If they are not in favor of any particular idea or any particular, let's say, talking about our own country, India. Now, if government has passed any law and people are not happy with the law, what are they going to do? They are going to criticize, right? So, these are the group of intellectuals or the educated people who are going to talk about these ideas, right? So, only this can happen when there is education, right? When people are educated all over the country, right? And this is how they are going to deepen democracy. Why, students? This is one of the process of participation, right? We have learned about the whole idea of participation. So, this is how people are participating in these political arenas here, okay? Now, modern education has the ability to change the attitude and outlook of people. Do you agree with this statement or not, students? Yes. When we are talking about today's era, we see that modern education has helped us a lot. Why? Because in today's day, discussions are taking place on big platforms, right? Deliberations are happening everywhere. People who were not aware about a lot of things are now getting aware. So, awareness. These are the key terms that should be kept in mind here. Discussions, deliberations, that is leading to awareness among people. So, modern education is helping a lot in some ways. It is changing the attitude and outlook of people towards any particular thing. It leads to political awareness among poor and backward classes. Now imagine a time when there was no technology at all. Definitely education has also led to the development of science and technology. Right, students? There was a time when there was no television. People were not able to discuss about a lot of things. In fact, people were not knowing or not having an ounce of idea about any particular thing. Right? But in today's day, as we are developing, right, in science and technology, people are also getting aware about a lot of things. People are watching television, people are watching news, and they are getting to know about in what ways government, they are trying to build a new India, right? Let's say the present government only. So these are some of the important points that you have to keep in mind. Now, these are some of the ways that can deepen democracy in our country, because in some ways it is helping in the participation of people here. Also, education builds skills beside giving information and increasing knowledge. Definitely, students. Now, today you are reading something. You are reading political science, you are reading history, then you are studying maths and many other subjects. What is happening? You are developing many skills, right? So, definitely we can say that education, it is building skills. That can be the mental skills, that can be the analytical skills, and so on, right? Social skills and so on. So here we have to understand this point as well, right? How are we going to utilize these skills here? Okay. Now one must have legal literacy. Talking about education, there is another point that you have to keep in mind. There is a new term that you are seeing here, that is legal literacy. You have understood the term literacy, but what do we understand by the term legal? You can definitely say that it is something related to law. Yes. So it means that we should have legal education, right, students? Now, once anyone is getting aware, anyone is educated, it does not mean that he is getting educated in all spheres. So, when we are talking about legal literacy, it means that one should be aware of the legal provisions of the laws that are being passed in our country. Legal provisions, right? So, this is an important point here. Now, what is this legal literacy? Legal literacy, it reminds us of our rights, our duties, and legal obligations towards society. Now, what happens here? Now, this is a very important weapon for any individual. The term that is legal literacy is a very important point here. How, students? Now, what happens that in our country, many laws are passed by the legislature, right? Many provisions are passed. Now, if you have the ideas of these laws, these provisions, you can definitely analyze the things, right? If the law is good or if the law is bad and so on. But if you're not having any idea, how are you going to fight the injustice, right? Might be that law proves injustice for you. And if you're not having any idea of these legal provisions, how are you going to question that? Therefore, legal education, legal literacy is really important in our country, right? To fight against the injustice that can happen, right? Sometimes it does happen but it can happen, right? So that can happen in society, right? So legal literacy, it reminds us of our rights, it reminds us of our duties and legal obligations towards our society. Now, what is happening today? People are so self-consumed. We have already learned about this point that there is growing disenchantment towards there is growing disenchantment towards politics, right? So what is happening? People are not participating. The best example was the total vote turnout, as in the percentage of people who were there to vote, right? This is the meaning here. Now, what happens? Now, if people are getting detached, it means that they are not going to fight for their rights, right? They are not going to understand their rights, they are not going to understand their duties, and not going to understand the legal obligations that they have towards their society. They need to preserve these rights, they need to preserve the duties, and they need to have some legal obligation, right, towards the society. It can only happen when they are working together, when they are promoting unity as well as development, working for the development of the overall society, right? So this is an important point here. Now, if people are doing this, what happens? If they are understanding the legal literacy, if they are understanding the concept of legal education, it makes them responsible citizens of civil society that is just and orderly, where people respect each other. There is a mutual respect for each other, right, students? So here we see that why legal literacy is important for us in our society and how is it going to deepen democracy in our country. Now the next point here is that of fundamental rights. Now, have you heard the term fundamental rights? Yes, you have learned about constitution. Definitely you have heard this term, that is fundamental rights, that is in part 3 of our Indian Constitution. So these are the basic rights that have been given to the individuals to protect themselves, right? So these are provided by the Constitution to reform a citizen's faith in democracy. And when we are talking about fundamental rights, we see that there are 6 major rights here, that is right to equality, right to freedom, that can be in various forms, right? So likewise, there are so many rights here, right? Constitutional rights as well, rights to educational rights, and so on, right, students? So here we see that people are provided these basic rights and they have to utilize it. They have to see that these basic rights are not being violated. That has been given in our Constitution. They make provisions for seeking an immediate and effective remedy for any violation of our rights. So, people have the right to move to courts whenever they feel that these basic rights that have been provided by the Constitution, it is being violated, right? Be it by any laws that government has passed or any other thing, right? Any other individual can do this, any government office can do this, and so on. So people, they have the right to fight for themselves. Another important point here is that of freedom of press. So like I told you, 6 fundamental rights are there, right? You can also learn about it when you will go in your senior classes. Now here, one important point is freedom of press. Now when we are talking about press, under which umbrella does it come? So definitely media. And you have learned about media as well. So media plays a very major role in forming public opinion, right, students? Now whenever in your house you will see that your parents, they are watching television, and in fact if you are interested in politics and you watch television shows, news, so on, you will see that many political parties, they sit down in a room and they are discussing on various issues, various laws that the government have passed, right? So what is happening here? Now, your parents and you as well, you are getting politically aware about a lot of things. You are generating these ideas or creating these ideas in your mind, right? And you are criticizing the ideas or the laws the government have passed, right? So here you are forming ideas, you are criticizing these ideas, and this is helping in the participation, right? In this whole political process. So freedom of press, it also helps in promoting democracy. This is how you have to explain this point. It also helps in forming public opinion. Totally relatable to this point. People are forming opinion about various issues, right? They are getting socially and politically aware about a lot of things. Okay. Now, in order to play an effective role, the press must follow a code of conduct. Yes, students. Now, sometimes what happens? Now, we see that media or press, they are also biased about a lot of issues. They can be biased towards any government, they can be biased towards any ideology. So, a definite code of conduct should be followed by press in order to have any effective role. So, what should happen here? An unbiased information should be passed on. It should be in the hands of people to decide what is wrong and what is right, since they are educated enough to distinguish between the right and the wrong. Right, students? So here an unbiased information should be passed on based on or by following a code of conduct. In that way, media can play a very effective role here, right, in shaping public opinion. Apart from it, economic security is also important. Now, what do you understand by economic security? We have already learned that inequalities exist in our society, right? And when I was talking about inequalities, I told you that inequalities can be in many forms. It can be in social form, economic form, gender form, political form, and so on. So, one of these, like I told you, is in economic form. Now, it means that there should not be vast disparity in the ownership of wealth. In simple terms, vast differences in the ownership of wealth. Definitely, students, we have seen that in our society, there is a huge or wide gap between the rich and the poor people, right? So, there is a section of ultra-rich people who have the control and influence in the government, and there is a section of weaker, disadvantaged groups here, right? So, this economic inequality should end, right? Now, another essential factor is a strong opposition. Now, when you were learning about the political parties, you have heard the term that is the opposition party. We can relate through this point here. Now, these opposition parties, they play a very important role again in shaping public opinions. Why, students? So, the main aim of opposition parties is to criticize the government whenever they are going on the wrong track, to question the government on the laws that they have passed. Very important point here, right? Because people are also getting aware then about these laws, what are the pros and cons of these laws, and so on. So dissent here is the essence of democracy. People are now discussing on various issues, right? It is only according to the will of people that government should pass laws. It plays a major role and it becomes the very essence of democracy. Because the basic definition here is what? That people, they are electing their representatives who are going to take the decisions on behalf of these people, right? So, therefore, we define it as by the people, for the people, of the people, right, students? So, these are some of the important points and the measures to deepen democracy in India. Now, coming to the question section here, there is a multiple choice question that is legal literacy means, and the options are legal help, legal education, work based on law, challenging legal institutions. Now, what have you learnt about legal literacy here? Is legal help the correct answer? No. Work based on law? No. Challenging legal institutions? Is this a precise answer here? No. So, when we are talking about legal literacy, the correct answer here should be B, legal education. To be aware about the legal provisions to fight against the injustice. So this is how you have to answer this question based on this idea. Thank you.